Okay. Hi, friends, and welcome back to Generation Social Media, Chatterkick's podcast, where we dive into the real and unexpected ways that marketing and community and connection collide today. I'm your host, Keyiera Wright. I'm the social media coordinator, the executive personal branding strategist, and the connection and community chair here at Chatterkick. And today's episode, we're sitting down with someone who's rooted in strategy and community. We have Imani Brisco with us, also known as Imani B. She's an experiential marketer and the founder of Generations of Hope. Imani's built a career around designing these moments that feel like love letters, as she told us, to the communities that they serve. So from think large scale brands to like very like smaller intentional gatherings that uplift people and inspire. Imani is that person who like really understands what it means to build community that doesn't just like look good, or brands that say that they're doing things for the community online. It's actually connections that you can kind of see them play out and they actually last. So today, we're talking about where her passion for this work began and what brands get wrong about community building, and then how they can get it right with more intention and action. So let's get into it. So thanks for being with us today, Imani. I'm so happy you're able to join us. What for those who might be new to you, what can you share a bit about the kind of work you do and what you're passionate about?
For sure, for sure. First, again, thank you for this space. I'm really excited about this conversation. And to answer your question, so what do they need to know about me and who I am? I like to coin that I am a community builder and dot connector that usually shows up in the realms of brand management or event production or experiential marketing and strategy. To your point, have had the pleasure of working with local champions and global giants, whether that be NBA teams, spirit brands, nonprofits, or restaurants. And my goal is always to make sure I'm empowering them to really build sustainable community and sustainable connection amongst their stakeholders. I have had a career in higher education, DEI strategy, and I've been able to use that and really translate that into high impact activations. So, not only curating events, but really curating connection as a whole. And I find joy in being a bridge for those opportunities, making sure that personal storytelling and brand equity are always at the center of what I'm creating.
You've had your hands in so many other parts of community, from like you said, the brand partnerships to the creative direction of these things, or event production. What's the thread that connects all these different parts for you?
I would say I'm thinking of two things, and the first one that comes up is really emotional intelligence
Mm.
meets execution. So thinking about what is the feeling, especially in marketing, a lot of the work kind of delves into psychology. Thinking of how are you meeting people where they are or where they need to be met. So thinking of whatever work that I'm doing, what emotion can I connect with and be authentic about, not just for emotion's sake, but truly and genuinely thinking of what that might mean for whatever's being presented. And then the second one is purpose driven storytelling, really building on the emotion, like what is our end goal here, how are we activating, how are we showing up authentically, and making sure that the message lasts beyond a campaign cycle or past an event. What is that evergreen moment that we can tap into that people talk about forever?
Nice. I feel like that through line is so powerful with like the emotional connection, and kind of making that last and like translating it in so many different ways. I feel like that sets the stage for something that I've been really curious about ever since being introduced to you, and that is your foundation. you can take your time with this one. I know it's kind of like a big question, but was there a defining moment in your life where you realized you wanted to do more than just kind of like work in community, where you just wanted to like create community?
For sure. Love that question. And do you know how there are certain families that will host like the big family gathering, like a 4th of July or something like Juneteenth, whatever it is?
Yes, yes.
So thinking of those families, I was that household. You know, I grew up in that space where every Kwanzaa or every summer holiday there would be a big shindig, a big community gathering, a family of friends in our backyard or in our, living room and kitchen. And so from there, it's always just been something that I was exposed to. It's not actually something I think I thought about. It was just what you did. You gathered, you celebrated, you made space for each other. And so if I really had to pinpoint a time where I actively said, "Oh, I'm going to create something," it was probably in high school when a dear friend of mine wanted to create a young women's group. And we were just trying to talk about coming of age topics and mentorship. And we were partnering with local nonprofits to have pop up events throughout the city focused on wellness. We were getting donations before we really knew what we were doing. And I think that type of community building has always been something that was important to me. With again, without me actually thinking about it. Um, but I've also had a lot of examples of what that looks like. And so I've been surrounded, honestly, from the beginning with folks that have shown me the way of how to do the things. But then I've had people that really just met me where I was. And I think that more falls in the philanthropic side, but I have found a way to translate that into a business and really thinking about how that relates to a brand as a whole.
Nice. I'm thinking about things that inspired me. I feel like maybe similar, but not necessarily in my family, but growing up in church, there are so many
Mhm.
examples of um, bringing people together for various things or various reasons. And that was such a foundation in my life. And I think that translated into the work I do too, just naturally, just it's just like a part of who you are, and knowing that like there's like a certain village and everyone plays these different roles, and I think that translates really well into the working world because the village is the team,
Yeah.
or like your pod, and each of these people have like different strengths, and like they all bring something together, and you can use all of those things to like draw other people in. So it's like there's you would probably call it like fellowship in
Yeah.
church, but like that's like networking, in the real world. So yeah, I can totally relate to that. So drawing more from your story, what inspired you to create Generations of Hope, and what does that name mean to you?
For sure. So, Generations of Hope was a passion project, as most things that I do are. Most of the work is like I'm passionate about it. Thankfully, I find opportunities that align there. But the, I guess, nexus of it was being back home. So I had been in LA for a few months and coming up into like my late grandmother's birthday. I was just seeing how the community stewardship wasn't what it used to be. There were a lot of transitory folks in the community there for, maybe a semester or just there for travel, but there wasn't the same importance around, okay, what does it look like to be a steward? And I remember my grandmother being someone who would, my grandmother Mary, she would be someone who cleaned up early in the morning, like 6 a.m., before people really got their day started. And you would never really think about like who did the work. It was just like done for you. And in a similar vein, I wanted to bring that energy back of it being our responsibility to really show up, to care for, nurture what the community could be. And so from there, I really wanted to just infuse this idea of like the legacy that I mentioned earlier in community care. So as a third generation organizer, my grandmothers, my parents, and then me, I grew up really witnessing what that means to be the heartbeat. My grandmother from the community cleanup she did, my Mary Lee, but then my other grandmother, Ruth, she worked within like school cafeterias and really wanted to nurture students through food and care. So being able to see those examples of leadership at home and that promise of what community could be, not just a place, but a feeling that can travel with you no matter where you go. Um, that was really the heartbeat in the beginning of Generations of Hope, and wanting to rebuild that for people who might not even have a long stake in the community, but knowing if you are here, this is what the expectation is, making sure folks knew what intention was, and were able to really contribute to this community overall. So that, and I think for me, creating this space is really opportunity for people to find what their version of volunteerism looks like. So one unique opportunity with Generations of Hope is it's never the same. Like there can be a community cleanup, there can be a fridge restocking, there can be peanut butter and jelly sandwich making, it can be a range of options. And with that, you get to find what works best for you. And again, reminding folks that no matter where life can take you, you can always come home to hope. And you can always contribute to that as well.
That's beautiful. I love the intention behind the meaning and the naming that you chose. And I also love what you said about community and meeting people where they're at, regardless of like their stake in it, and just figuring out what their place is, and just making it feel like a place they can come home to, regardless of where they are at the moment, because everyone truly can offer something,
Yeah.
no matter how big or small. So I think that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the future of community work. I feel like community is such a hot buzzword right now in marketing, and everyone's just trying to figure out where they fit in. Where do you see the future of community work going?
I think I think it's going to be interesting because I see this idea of slow community versus like a viral attention, where there will be a rise in your, for example, a micro influencer, where they might not have the thousands and thousands of followers, but they do have the trust of their community. And I think folks are definitely leaning more towards those pockets, because they don't want to be sold to. They want to be thoughtfully, brought into a world. So definitely thinking about a slow community build and loyalty over virality overall, and how can you add value within these communities genuinely, and how can we get away from this idea of vanity metrics. So I'm really excited to see how micro engagement and micro influencers take a step up, and how they're tapped on as we move forward. That's what I see as um, where we're going.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like the word influencer has just like shifted so much, and the sheer amount of work that they are kind of under to just like churn out so many things. I think we've quickly even seen influencers start to get burned out and start to have like different boundaries now. And um, I've been starting to see the word tastemaker show up a lot, and like tastemakers are like trendsetters, but they're not necessarily in that same context. So I think when I think about the future, I think about that too. I think about like the tastemakers having a like a unique or like practical skill, but it's like they're not spread so thin. They're kind of just like very, very niche, and they can change mindsets versus like they change the way you think about something versus like trying to influence you to buy something or like promote something.
Yeah.
Um, so I think about that a lot too. What trends or shifts are you personally watching or leaning into right now?
I would say trends or shifts. I think building off of the idea of the micro, influencer as one, but I also am excited about just in real life experiences. I think there are so many brands that are really thinking about experiential in a new way, and how can we blend our narrative, blend our ethos into something people can tangibly take away or step into. So this idea of world building is becoming super popular, and I think for the last few months especially, but like years, like just thinking of how you can capitalize on this, and thinking of even the five senses is really big for me. So how does that show up in an event or an experience? Is
Yeah,
there a way to incorporate, smell, touch, sound, all
yeah,
of the elements for it to be a full circle immersive time for folks, is what I'm really excited about.
yeah, like that multi-sensory experience.
Mhm.
Nice. I feel like I'm happy that you said this about in person because at Chatterkick we talk a lot about human connection in the digital world. It's something we say all the time, and I think people often miss that part where digital could mean in person as well. It doesn't have to literally mean that the connection stays
Yeah.
online or virtual. Um, do you think of the future of community is more digital, more in person, or just like what percentage do you think it kind of weighs? Do you think it'll eventually be more in person or just something else entirely? Because I kind of think that we started to crave connection amongst ourselves. And I think that Facebook groups and things like that started to really thrive in the past couple years. And I think that has led to people doing meetups or like pop-ups. And, you don't just find people that you have these commonalities online. They're starting to say like, hey, let's do like a coffee meet. Like people are just starting to meet briefly and just hang out with like their people that they found online. Um, so yeah, what do you think about that for the future? Like what mix do you see happening?
It's definitely going to be a blend. You cannot cancel out digital, right? Like you have to have that as one of the spaces you're engaging. However, I do think leaning more into in real life, like how can we translate digital to in person, is where the conversation is heading. Or to your point, like even if we have these digital spaces, like how are we driving that to something that really breaks down these walls, breaks down these barriers? If the pandemic showed us anything, like we really do crave connection with, other folks that have maybe a similar point of view, perspective, or interests. So if there was a percentage, I would say the digital is like a 40%
Mhm.
and the remaining being like pushing towards a more in person. Like ultimately that's the goal. And again, just breaking down the borders so it feels like something tangible. It feels like something. I think digital sometimes can feel effervescent. Like you can look at something, feel something, then it's like, okay, on to the next thing. But if you can really bring that home within a in real life experience, it I think 10x's the possibilities and opportunities for a brand.
I agree. So let's zoom out a little bit for this topic and talk about the why behind all of this. So, why do you think that building community for brands really matters?
Mm, I think simply put, shifting from my generations of hope brain to like a brand, like true brand brain, I think it's emotions are data. So you are able to understand people's motivations um, based on your calculation of, you know, how they're feeling. So if you want to buy something, if you want to engage with a brand, if you want to, you know, just think further, think deeper about your place in this ecosystem, and how you want to show up, a lot of that can be pulled from like how you are making people feel. So not thinking of folks as just an audience, but as ambassadors for your brand, thinking of how they are carrying your story forward, is really important because uh, they get to really amplify your message and get it out there to their networks and do some of the work for you, really. So I would say community is, or community care really is brand trust ultimately. Thinking about how you go about that has to be a crucial part of your overall branding.
Um, I feel like it is so tricky because, like you said, for brands or like even online, it does feel so like effervescent. Um, how do you talk about like ROI? Like, I know you work with stakeholders. How do you communicate that when the value, a lot of it is like emotional or cultural or relational? It's like some of it you can touch and some of you can't. How do you communicate that with stakeholders?
Great question. I think the return is really when you think about the engagement, when you think about not so much, you know, likes on a post, but are people having a conversation about it? Are we making people um, just want to really to talk? I think in such a hyper touch world where we have, you know, a digital, we could do it in person, we could do a hybrid of it. Are you really carrying it forward through the community that you're creating? So the return is having brand loyalty, or brand trust rather, that however, you know, we are showing up, you know how we are, who we are, and that at the end of the day that we are focusing our efforts around the community that we're building. So I would say it's not a tangible asset. It really is keeping the conversation open and engaging with folks. And especially when we think about Gen Z, millennials, there's a curve and interest in not necessarily sticking with, you know, one brand at a time, but really how can we meet them where they are, where they want a bit more fluidity. So being one of the top brands that they're thinking about as they're making their decisions, I think is helpful. But it is going to be that emotional. It is going to be the cultural. Like being able to say you're in those conversations is going to be important.
So let's say there's a brand that has never built community before, but they're curious about it. What's the very first place that you tell them to get started?
Hmm. Great question. To get started, I would say think about like one-on-one connections. So like versus like it has to be this big, bold, you know, thing. I would say the experiences, the connections that I've made have taken years, right? The brand trust and loyalty that I've had an opportunity to tap into was being authentic and showing up in a way where I genuinely wanted to get to know people or brands or see where I fit into that narrative, and being able to study and really strategize over time of like, okay, when we're talking business side of things, um, this is how they're showing up. How can, you know, I amplify that, or what might they be missing? Really showing up in that way where you have a critical eye for what's going well and what could be improved. Um, I think there are folks that are on either side of this, but I like to test in private and scale in public. So getting input from the folks around me, before I, do a larger launch. So for years, for example, for years I've been mailing out seasonal cards to family and friends. And I mean, this is like over 100 cards to
Oh,
people. And it started to honestly feel like a business. And so after doing it for years and really being intentional about what I was crafting, the messages I was sending, the trinkets I included in those, I was like, this actually, there's an opportunity here. And so after years of doing that, I started to see an opportunity to scale that in public and create this mail service, Stamp Society, where folks were getting affirmations. They were getting reminders of who they are, um, and that has been something where a passion. Again, I'm always finding a passion project that is scalable, but being able to take that and really share that message with a larger group and community is just an example of testing it, in private, being able to really think about how this can impact a larger community, if you were to expand, if you were to scale. But that's what I'm thinking about. So really building those one-on-one connections, being intentional and authentic with those, overthinking of this big picture of what it must be, and testing in private, scaling in public.
nice. The card story that she told reminds me of. I had a friend of mine. She was a coworker, and she moved, and we stopped working together. But we wanted to stay in touch, and something that we had an idea to do was to send each other like postcards.
Yes,
And so I sent her a postcard, and like the mail lady, when she picked it up, she knocked on my door, and I thought something was wrong, and she was like, "Where did you get this from?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "This postcard," and I was like, I went to an art show and I just picked it up,
yeah,
and she's like, I have been delivering mail for a very long time and I have not seen a postcard in years. She
it's
was so excited to deliver it.
And I think that goes back to even the earlier piece about like slow community, viral attention. Like, it's not, I think people are really craving what things used to be, in a sense of like, it doesn't have to be like this text message or this email or this, like or share on a social media platform. Like, going back to what are the classic ways we would engage and connect with one another,
Yep.
I think is what people are craving
Mhm.
truly.
Yep, just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I think that gives a great sense of what that looks like in action. I'm thinking if someone's shifting into what that could feel like on a day to day, what's a low lift like idea that you've seen work well for like a small team, like someone who maybe they don't have a lot of resources, or they're a startup, or they're kind of starting solo, or they're just like maybe in a few roles. Like maybe there's someone who wears like a lot of hats and they don't have like a marketing team. What's something that they could do that feels like very doable and easy in their journey in this getting started?
Okay. I would say something that comes to mind is, um, I think that one on one, honestly, connection is something that would translate in this space. So, when you, let's say, have an activation or an event, how can you make sure that every person in that space feels seen? So that's just something, you don't have to have anybody else, in the loop to do that. And I think that is something for me when I think of experiential and event production, like, it is truly making people feel welcome. So in real life opportunity, it's not about, you know um, necessarily hopping on a mic and saying all the things. It's how can I talk to this person, make sure that they feel like I remember their name, like I remember that thing that they told me that they like, and I was able to just carry that with me, and maybe in that follow up experience in person, being able to bring that full circle. I think little things like that can go a long way. And in a similar vein, like, instead of thinking you have to do this large scale marketing campaign, maybe send out a custom DM. invite to someone instead of like this generalized promotion. How can you make sure people feel like, oh, like this is a personal, because
Hmm.
people are more likely to come to an experience if they feel like it was something, geared towards and customized for them. So one-on-one connections in person, but maybe custom DMs and invites if you needed to translate that online.
I feel like there's a certain amount of research and really getting to know your audience too that goes into that, because there are a lot of brands who build personas and like target audiences, but there's a certain amount of like social listening that you have to
Yeah.
do.
Oh, for sure.
And like moderation, like maybe diving deeper and seeing like what are people saying in the comments, what are people sharing the most, like how do they talk to each other about your brand or your product. So I think there's a certain amount of intentionality that goes into like getting to know them versus like you said, like that broad, are you just broadcasting this to
Yeah.
everyone,
Because
or
at the
is this like you see me?
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, we all want to be heard, seen, celebrated. So, to your point, that social listening is definitely an opportunity to make sure maybe that target is really matching with, who they actually are. Because you might have an idea, but the data might say otherwise. So, getting to know them is super important, and that intentionality goes a long way.
That might be the answer to this question, but just curious because at Chatterkick we work with a lot of B2B brands that don't necessarily have like B2C or something flashy or fun to talk about all of the time. And I know that you work across industries. Is there one like universal truth across the board that they could carry that you've seen in community building that like no matter the brand, no matter the audience, um, something that a B2B brand could do to remember, I guess, to establish a strong foundation of building community for them?
For sure. Um, I would say thinking about, it's not necessarily about being the flashiest, the loudest. I think it's really about being felt, going back to that idea of emotion. At the end of the day, the work that we're doing does usually come from this place of emotion. How are we using that as a driving force? So, is it when we think B2B, maybe think like be human to human? Um, how are we connecting authentically? How are we seeing what the pain points are, or shared values? Like, how can that be a part of the conversation and always at the core of why we do it, what we do? Because I would say for me, community is really an opportunity for continuity, in a brand funnel overall. So that has to really be at the core of the work.
Yeah, I think something that I think is important when I'm talking to um, people that I work with is that emotion doesn't necessarily mean, happiness or sadness. It doesn't have to be a dramatic emotion. It like your pain points are, a point of frustration for that person or confusion for that person. So that's an emotion.
Yeah,
What feels overwhelming to them, that's also an emotion. So it doesn't have to be emotional in a way that you think it's gonna, invoke a
yeah,
virality, I guess. It's just like meeting them at like, okay, if this is their pain point or in your funnel or in their buying process, what are they feeling at these certain
stage.
points?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I think that's really important to kind of like reframe in a B2B space. Okay, so we've talked about this on all different scales. To end, we like to give everyone something that they could do today, like an action mission. So if someone's listening to this right now and they want to take action today, right now, what are one or two, maybe three simple things that they could do, like give themselves a goal or a challenge, like by the end of the week, this is what I'm going to do to start nurturing my community.
love that question. If there were, I will give you two. So I would say one, do an audit. So who are you talking at? versus who are you talking with?
Mm.
How are you truly engaging with people? How are you getting to know them? How are they getting to know you? Um, to the points of, is it a general promotion? Are you customizing what the conversations or starting points are of how you begin to engage with them? Really do an audit and think thoroughly about how you're showing up, because at the end of the day, people are more responsive and engage with um, brands or people that are investing in them as well. So I would say that's one. Audit two, um, think of a 30-day maybe community spotlight series. You don't need to do any graphics or anything, but give people their flowers without asking anything of them. The surprise one will go a long way. But two, you're also being able to show people that they are seen, that they're celebrated, and as a result, there is almost this, community building built into that, and no one even like need asks for it. So I think that would go a long way, and I mean, it's your branding for them, but then you're also being related to whatever the brand you're spotlighting is. So that can also help on like your positioning.
All right. Well, Imani, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing everything so openly. I really do think that the work that you do is so special, especially in 2025 with everything going on. And I think it's important that our audience is walking away with, some key takeaways and things they could do. And I think those are a really like easy starting point that they could just take something and run with it. So thank you so much for that clarity and the inspiration that you gave us. If anyone's listening and you want to keep learning from Imani or follow the incredible work that she's doing, you can connect with her on LinkedIn. Her information is going to be in the description, so you can connect with her and follow her. And if this episode got your wheels turning and you want to share it, please do with a teammate or a client or anyone else in your network who's ready to show up for their community in a more intentional way. Imani, thanks again for being here with us, and we'll see you next time on Generation Social Media.
Thank you.